You'll notice some of the housekeeping reminders that we have displayed for you. You are muted and your camera is off, so please, if you have any comments or questions for the presenter, just put them in the chat option and we'll get to you. Our presenter, Jenny Stotts, is the Executive Director of the Athens, Ohio CASA GAL program and the Regional Director of Southeast Ohio CASA. She's an accomplished presenter, having presented at small community events all the way up to international audiences and conferences, giving keynotes that have been translated into more than a dozen languages. She also serves as a trainer and consultant, providing coaching services to organizations in the areas of leadership development, change management, and workforce development. Ms. Stotts is a licensed social worker specializing in child welfare and trauma-informed organizations. And this training is taught through a trauma-informed lens of resilience. Ms. Stotts?
Hello, hello, good morning. I will have to share my screen here and we'll get rolling. Okay. I have to readjust all the windows now. Okay. So hello, everyone, and thank you for having me this morning. And first of all, thank you to the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth for getting creative with an event like this and finding a way for us to safely be together while we're really far apart. A few things about me that I think you should know. First, I wear a lot of hats. I do this, I talk to people. I like to think that I've gotten pretty good at talking to people, but still something I'm learning and working on every day. I'm a social worker, I'm a child advocate. As Gwen mentioned, I work for an organization called CASA, or Court Appointed Special Advocates, and it really is the honor of my life to work in an organization like this with the people that I get to share this work with. Before I came here to CASA, I actually worked in child protection. I was a child sexual assault investigator, and I worked as a child welfare, child protective caseworker. I often joke that I have a 360-degree view of the child welfare system. And as I mentioned, I now work within the court system, and I do a lot of organizational policy development work. So I have this kind of advocacy perspective, this legal perspective, and I worked in child protection and direct services. And I actually first came to know the child welfare system when I was just a baby. I happened to have been a surrendered infant. I was surrendered into the Ohio's foster care system and placed into a foster home. And I was later adopted. And my family continued to foster, dozens, hundreds of children. So kind of having that perspective of growing up that way, having my own story that I often have to unpack or kind of take note of because of the importance of the work that I do and trying to be really mindful of how those experiences and my own experiences could potentially impact the work that I do. I also have experience in the child welfare system as a parent. My husband and I elected to build our family through foster care adoption. And so I am especially sensitive to how terrifying and anxiety inducing it is when you have someone coming to your home for the sole purpose of judging you, right? Even though we don't use those terms professionally, we don't say, oh, we're going to go in and judge this family. That's really what's happening. And it's a little scary to know that someone could, is kind of sitting there evaluating you, assessing you as a parent and determining whether or not you get to be a parent. So I have kind of that perspective that informs my compassion a little bit. So like I said, I wear lots of hats. I'm a wife, a mother, a friend. I try to be an active member of my community. I volunteer a great deal of my time for an organization called Rotary, and I am hopeful that there might be a couple of Rotary members on the line. So if you happen to be a member of Rotary, I'd love for you to drop the name of your club in the chat box so that I can see it. I nerd out to an embarrassing level when my Rotary and work collide, and I'm able to connect with people that way. So I hope that if you are a member of Rotary that you will drop that in the chat because I'd love to connect with you on that. So like I said, lots of hats, but what I'm not is the all-knowing master of all the things. I hope that I'll share some things with you today that you probably already know. I might end up validating something that you already do. And maybe, just maybe, you'll hear maybe one little nugget that might get your mind going or that might give you a different perspective than you had before. But this time is yours as much as it is mine. So I invite you to right now set an intention to be present in this virtual space that we're sharing right now so that we can make the most of our time together. And I will say, if your eyes happen to wander into other browsers on your screen during the session, I know it happens, right? You're looking at something else. If that happens, I hope that we can just go ahead and enter into an informal agreement right now that if you happen to come across any adorable baby animal videos while you're browsing the web during this presentation, it should be understood that you will send those links to me so that I can enjoy them once this presentation is over. So as long as we have that set. Let's see kind of how this goes. So I'm going to be talking to you today about the art of doing it all. But remember, that does not mean that I've got this all figured out. I'm a mess most days. It's a beautiful mess, I like to think, but I'm still learning. And for the next 100 minutes or so, we're going to learn together. So like I said, for the next 100 minutes or so, we're going to be learning together. So let's start. In one word in the chat box, please. I would love it if you would drop one word about your daily routine. So just one word and drop that into the chat. If you're having trouble finding the chat box, it's probably on the bottom of your screen. Yep, so someone's already, and you might not be able to see everyone else's chats. I can see them. So I'm gonna read off a few. Chaos, busy, work, limited, great. Frenzy, scheduled, chaos, coffee, busy. Okay, great. Lots of busy, crazy, calendar, hectic. Paris Rotary Club, thanks, Missy. Planner, hectic. Okay. Wow, I'm sensing a theme. Nonstop, virtual. Perfect. So as you all are filling up the chat there, I'm going to tell you a story, and you just stop me when this story sounds familiar. So you're grocery shopping and you're pushing your cart through the aisles, you're checking your list, and you know, we're in the pandemic, so you're kind of watching out, you're making sure your mask is up and you sanitize, all those things. You're pushing your cart, looking at your list, trying to decide how many of these meals that you have planned are you actually going to cook this week, and how much food are you going to end up throwing away. And you know, then it happens. You look across the banana cart or the spinach section and you see them. It's someone that you used to work with like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, and you haven't seen them in a long time. And you were friendly with them when you worked together. You just kind of lost touch as things happen, as that goes. And you kind of start going through that mental negotiation with yourself where you're thinking, okay, am I in the mood to do people? Like, am I feeling people-y today? Am I going to go and have this whole conversation with them where we kind of do the little catch up over the tomato section of the produce aisle? Or am I going to pretend to be on a phone call? Please tell me I'm not the only person who's ever pretended to be on a phone call to avoid having to talk to another human being in the grocery store. So you're pushing your cart through the aisles, you see this person, and then it happens. You accidentally make eye contact with them. It's happening, it's going down. You're gonna have to, you're gonna have to do the people thing. You're gonna have to talk to them. So you make eye contact and you stop what you're doing, and then all of a sudden you go, hi, hi. And you start thinking to yourself, why am I using this voice? This is not my voice. This is not how I talk. You take a big breath, and then they say, how have you been? And you go, oh, you kind of fluff up your peacock feathers and you go, oh, I have been so busy, just so busy, right? Who has said this? Drop a 1 in the chat if you have ever said that. When someone says, how are you? How are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. It's almost like we say it proudly, like busy has become a new feeling that we have, and a lot of you shared that. So I don't know who needs to hear this, but there is no award for being the busiest person on the planet. I get that there are times when you're going to feel overwhelmed and you have a lot of balls in the air. We all do. But if that state of being so busy and so overwhelmed has somehow become your default, friends, I invite you to spend some time taking inventory. Maybe reprioritize a little. Some years ago, I found myself saying something pretty often, and I would find myself saying, I needed a vacation. Like I needed it, like heavy emphasis, needed in bold-faced lettering. But we don't spend the whole of our lives on vacation, right? I probably, like many of you, earn just a few weeks of vacation each year. So if I were to restrict myself to relaxation, fulfillment, joy only during those few weeks of vacation, what kind of life is that? Think about vacation. So think about your last vacation, the last one you went on. Describe that vacation in one word and add that into the chat box. Fun, hurricane, oh gosh, Risha, I'm sorry about that. Peaceful, relaxing, free, family, quiet. Sounds like a lot of people had their vacation disrupted by a hurricane. I'm sorry to hear that. Fast, beautiful, hard to relax, refreshing, restorative, calming, mountains. Great, great. So let's think about that. So much of what motivated me to learn about the things I'm going to talk to you about today, to learn and kind of implement these practices and tactics for efficiency and productivity, actually stemmed from a desire to build into my everyday life the feelings of peace that I found myself having on vacation, right? I don't want to lead a life that I feel like I need to constantly escape from, right? I don't want to feel frenzied all the time. But also, there's still things that need to get done. People still depend on me. So, a fun little thing that my family does, we don't say that we go on vacation, we go on adventures. And now, for those of you that are saying, well, nice job with the thesaurus, Jenny, but you just came up with a new word for vacation. And so you're right, it is just a different word for vacation, but it's also a perspective shift, which is one way that we can take advantage of those natural tendencies in our brains to think differently, because we as a society attach a lot of connotation to the words that we use. So it just makes it feel like more of a choice to explore the world, change up the scenery, go on an adventure, right? That seems a little more fun, more of a choice of something I'm doing rather than this need to escape the life that I lead 51 weeks of the year. So I share this story with you because it's really the reason that I started to think hard about how could I be more efficient and more productive so that I don't feel frantic all the time. And so I wish that I could say it was because I was just, I'm such a hard worker and I was just so moved to do more for my job or more for the cause that I believe in. But it's really because I do my best work when I am able to strike a peaceful balance across all aspects of my life. So for the rest of our time together, I want to talk to you about the art of doing it all. And I hope to lift the curtain on the top tips of highly efficient and highly effective people. And I really do hope that it will either validate you, inspire you, or motivate you. I'm going to work really hard to make sure that it doesn't bore you. So here we go. The first lesson in the art of doing it all, I hope you have your pens ready because this is lesson number 1 in the art of doing it all. It's this: don't do it all. So there, I said it. I gave away the punchline. Highly productive people are really, really, really good at not doing things. And this doesn't feel right in our bellies somewhere, right? In our little like capitalist socialized guts somewhere. It doesn't feel good. Because when we observe people who are productive, that we perceive them to be really productive and really efficient, they seem to do a lot of things, right? They're really busy all the time. But the real measure is all the things that they don't do. So what I'm really saying is make sure that your yeses are yeses. Your word and your commitment are your most valuable assets. So condition your yeses to be yeses in bold face lettering. So when you're asked to volunteer or someone, wants you to take on a project, or even if you're just invited to meet someone for lunch, think about the magnitude of that yes that yes that you give, and do not give it if you cannot commit. Now, this doesn't mean that there won't be times when the unexpected happens or you have to take care of yourself, right? Sometimes we just have to say, no, I'm overloaded, I have to back out. So I'm not talking about those things, not talking about ignoring your needs. There are times that you have to cancel or change plans or even withdraw from a project because circumstances have changed. My point here is that we be honest with ourselves before we say yes, so that canceling later on or missing those deadlines is the exception. From a pure efficiency standpoint, canceling and rescheduling or rearranging is just not a good use of our time. So let's imagine you make a lunch date with a friend for a day that is just really packed. Your to-do list is a mile long, you have meetings, you have deadlines. It's like a game of dependability roulette. So you make this plan, the day comes, of course, you can't step away from your desk and you're on back-to-back phone calls. And then in the middle of all of that, you have to stop and expend, right? Kind of you're spending your mental energy and your focus to cancel on your friend. You have those feelings of guilt, you feel bad, you're frustrated with yourself, and it might even make you feel resentful of all the tasks that you had to do, right? Because you had to do this kind of shuffling, this mental shuffling. So the lesson here is not don't make lunch plans with your friends. No, make all the lunch plans with your friends. The lesson is to plan for tasks and meetings and projects to take a little longer than expected. Efficient people, efficient organizations plan on things going wrong. So today's Friday. Let's say that one of you sends me a message after this presentation because you were so inspired, of course, by something I say, and you want to discuss these strategies a little bit further. So you reach out to me and I look at my calendar and I say, oh, next week is too busy, but let's have a phone call 2 weeks from now on the Friday after next. And I say that because the Friday after next right now looks really open. Now, the reason, spoiler alert, the reason that it's open right now is because I haven't scheduled or planned it yet. So I can guarantee that the Friday of our call is probably going to end up being a bit busier than it looks right now. So let's say we plan on a 30-minute video call and it's set to begin at 11 a.m. Now, when I plan around that meeting, I'm planning for 45 minutes and I will not schedule anything that has the chance to last past 10:45 a.m. on the day of our call. And the reason is I don't want to end a call or a meeting with just minutes to spare before I have to transition to talk to you. Now, I want at least maybe 10 minutes to prepare. I want at least 10 minutes to be able to prepare so that I can make the most of our time together. Because if I don't, right, I might end up using the first several minutes of our calls kind of mentally transitioning still. And I might not have had a chance to use the restroom, grab a drink of water, whatever those environmental needs I need to tend to for myself. And this time might actually make our scheduled call extend longer than anticipated. And it kind of sets off this chain of events for the rest of the day to be a little bit behind. And again, that's that frantic feeling I don't like. So how true is this, right? Who else is feeling this in the time of back-to-back-to-back virtual meetings? Drop a 1 in the chat if you've, went the whole day and realized that you hardly went to the bathroom, you hardly got a drink of water because your Zoom calls or your Teams meetings were just back-to-back-to-back-to-back, right? Pre-pandemic, when we weren't doing all of those things, you had time in the car, you were kind of planning on that travel time, all those things. And I encourage you all to think back to that and kind of build in that mental travel time that you need before your meetings. And I don't know about all of you, but I do not do my best work when I'm feeling distracted or feeling rushed, right? It might lead to me trying to do multiple things at once, right? It's this little thing that we like to call multitasking. So since you brought it up, let's talk about multitasking. I manage, like all of you, a lot of things in my personal and professional life. There are a lot of people who depend on me. And I know there are a lot of people who depend on you. And I know that we're all in the same boat here, right? We're all kind of experiencing this. People tell me all the time, and you've probably heard this, people say, oh, you must be really, really good at multitasking. I'm not. And neither are any of you, actually. In fact, our brains do not allow us to multitask well. We physically can't do it. Now, truly, multitasking is the most ridiculous lie that capitalism, quite frankly, has ever told us. Even the term multitasking is extremely misleading. We are not completing two tasks at once. That's what we think. We think that we have some superhuman power and we're completing 2 or 3 tasks at once. That's not what's happening. We aren't completing them at once. We are rapidly shifting our focus from one task to another. That's what we're doing, right? Who's guilty of this? Where you're kind of constantly moving back and forth, right? Because this means that we are reducing our mental capacity in each task and we are increasing fatigue, right? There are some exceptions that I do want to explain, but someone added something in the chat of, yep, the type of overlapping schedule is often really praised in our culture, right? All the value we place on, hard work and work ethic. And Andrea shares in the chat, how many times do we hear above and beyond about someone who is available at all hours and that person is praised for that sacrifice that they make, right? We kind of set that up. So that's really hard to contend with, with all of these things that I'm talking about. So thank you for sharing and contributing that, Andrea. Oh, and someone's asking, it shows that you're the only attendee. It's I can see the comments that everyone is sharing, and that's why I'm reading them off. I don't think you can see each other's comments. So I will, if there's something to share, I'll definitely share it with the group because I do want everyone to be able to contribute to this conversation. So like I said, when we're trying to multitask, we are really rapidly shifting our focus and our energy back and forth from one task to the next. And that, one, reduces that mental capacity in both of those tasks, but it also increases our fatigue. So there are some exceptions that I do want to explain. So I probably, like many of you, I really enjoy listening to podcasts. So it's like while I'm driving or while I'm cleaning around the house, I often have a podcast going on. I don't know about the rest of you, but I did a lot of pandemic projects in my house. And I have a hard time regulating my behavior when it comes to projects that I get excited about. So, painting my kitchen cabinets ended up with me ripping everything out of my kitchen and doing everything new. And I did that in a few rooms of our house. So I had a lot of podcast time while I was doing those various tasks and painting and scraping and peeling and doing all that. Also, side note, is anyone else disturbed by how much you like true crime podcasts? Drop a 1 in the chat if you find yourself like guiltily enjoying them maybe a little too much. Yeah, I encourage you not to analyze that too much. I've kind of went into some dark sides of Google trying to figure out why I like them so much. Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes I do it when I'm running, and if I'm running after dark, I kind of think this is probably not the most comforting thing for me to listen to when I'm running after dark. Okay, so back to this. Doing podcasts, listening to podcasts while we are cleaning, while we're doing this other task. We can do this. Our brains can allow us to do those two functions and those tasks successfully because listening to the podcast and cleaning, that physical thing that I'm doing, do not require the same parts of our brain. But if we would try to listen to a podcast while we're writing emails, our brains are working harder to sort out the words of the email and the words of the podcast, right? We can do it. We can do those things. We can, move back and forth between those tasks. The problem is that we are fatiguing ourselves. We're making ourselves tired. So, when I'm, writing, or if I'm working remotely from home, it's better to, if you want to have some sound, you want to have kind of soft acoustic, like maybe instrumental music on or something like that. But you will fatigue yourself if you're trying to get your brain to do the, kind of mental energy of shifting back and forth. Now, this is one tiny example of an intentional decision that I've made about my own personal work habits. But what about all of the things that pop up unexpectedly and may entice us to try out multitasking? How many of us work on the computer and have a tab or browser open to our email at the same time? Drop a 1 in the chat if you're guilty of this. So you're working on something, writing, whatever it is, writing reports, and then you also have your email open. Ugh, don't do that. Also, I encourage you to consider turning off notification settings. Like many of you probably, right? I have so many ways that technology is keeping hold of me, right? I have, my computer, I have a laptop, an iPad, a phone, I have a watch, all those things. And I invite you to consider turning off some of the notifications if you can. I know sometimes remote workplaces, you have to have it on or something like that so you can be responsive to certain things. But when you're really wanting to focus, consider turning those things off. So if let's say I'm writing a report or I'm doing research and an email notification comes in, even if I don't respond to that email right away, I have now divided my attention, and it will require energy to refocus on that primary task. Obviously, it's inefficient, right? But it also increases fatigue, like I was saying before. Now, doing this every once in a while, not a big deal. But if this is a habit or your standard work routine, it could kind of increase that fatigue, kind of make you feel a little exhausted at the end of the day. So what I encourage you to do is to schedule some time for what I like to call deep work. That work that you really need to focus on. And for me, it's writing. So I have to be really intentional and deliberate with writing time. So that's time I carve out to be quiet and limited of distractions. If I'm writing something like, writing a presentation or writing a paper, working on an article, something like that, it's hard for me to kind of even, be able to do that with my kids kind of running around. I really do need to focus. So I encourage you to find times where you can make yourself a little unreachable during those times so that you can really focus without that distraction. Now, how many of you are thinking, and drop a 1 if this is true, how many of you are thinking, Jenny, it's not the notifications that get me distracted, it's my mind. I think of ideas or other things and it gets me off track, right? How many of you have that happening right now? Okay, yeah, lots. You're in good company. There's lots of 1s coming through, here. I'm also seeing lots of you giving some feedback on the, notifications and things like that of how difficult that can be. So we all have this happen, right? We get distracted. There are other things on our minds, right? And, like I said, I wear a lot of hats. I'm sure all of you wear a lot of hats. So the trick that I love for this is to have a scratch pad or a notebook nearby while I'm doing that deep work. Like I plan for that deep work. If I know I'm going to be writing an article, I want to, plan for that. And I know that those, either the notifications or the thoughts that pop into my head that, I get excited or distracted by, and just keep a piece of scrap paper, a notebook, whatever it is, and jot down these ideas and thoughts that come in so that I can reattend to them later without doing a complete mental shift. So I like to call this my distraction list. So rather than beat yourself up, if you're someone, it sounds like a lot of you have that issue of your mind just kind of wandering, I invite you to just embrace it, create space for it, and take it easy on yourself, right? Don't manage your time, but manage your energy, right? Don't just manage time. Also think about how you manage your energy. And so this brings me, and for those of you that are looking at the screen right now, I typed out one of my distraction lists of the things that popped into my mind when I was actually writing this presentation and doing the outlines for this presentation. But this brings me to another point, recovery. So recovery is essential for building resilience and for, being a building block for resilience. And I don't know if you all know this, but the human brain actually requires recovery every 60 to 90 minutes. So think about this. You've had a packed day. We'll tell you a little story time here. You had a packed day. You went from meeting to meeting to meeting. You met all of your deadlines. You cranked out a ton of projects, reports, whatever it is. You caught up with all of your outstanding emails. You were a complete and total rock star. You powered through, right? How many of you have ever said, I powered through? I'd love to see an example of a day that you powered through if you want to drop that into the chat. Someone shared in the chat, Van Cat Meow for info about living in a van, Australian couple with a cat living in a van. That was part of the distraction list. Thank you for sharing. Yep. So we have someone who powers through with a migraine, right? They're not feeling great and they're powering through, kind of getting through all those things. Absolutely. Great. Powering through when you have cramps or, you know, any kind of physical distraction or kind of physical wellness issue. Absolutely. And just busy. I think when I was asking about the back-to-back Zoom calls, a lot of you said even today was a day where you were tightly scheduled, and you're kind of, you know, have to power through those things. And so, oh, someone says, I thought I was the only one that made out a list of my brain thoughts. Yep. No, you are not alone. Other things here, oh, power through when you have grandchildren in tow. Great. Yep, lots of struggles here, you know, kind of powering through with medical conditions. Yep, when I've been someone's been on call and has had less than 3 hours of sleep, right? Just being mentally exhausted, right? It doesn't have to be like a physical thing. It's just you're mentally exhausted. Yep. Someone shares, I think many of us can relate. It's hard multitasking when you're working from home and you have a baby because it's hard to focus on just one thing. And I think a lot of folks who are working remote or worked remote, you know, last year have found that struggle, right? And kind of, especially as we settle in and that becomes more normative, how challenging that can be. Yep, someone shares kind of, I'm going to leave this training early because I have to be on another call, managing an internship and a full-time job, right? Lots of hats, lots of balls in the air. So think about those days that you have powered through, and right, like whether you're in the office or wherever you are, you've powered through, you've gotten everything done, total rock star. And as you were powering through, you thought to yourself, you know, when I get home, I'm going to get that load of laundry done, right? That, you know, I noticed it this morning. I'm going to get that load of laundry done. I'm going to make a healthy, refreshing dinner. You know, I went to the farmer's market this past weekend. I'm going to finally like get all those vegetables into the mouths of my family. I'm going to make this refreshing, healthy dinner. You know, you're going to finally maybe write those thank you notes that you've been meaning to write for several weeks. And you're kind of telling yourself, you know, I'm being so productive today. I am on a roll. I am powering through. When I get home, I'm going to keep this up and I'm going to just keep on rocking. And the end of the day comes and you go home. You walk in the door and you drop your bag. And it's one of those days where you know, you don't even just set it down. You kind of shrug it off of your body because you just want to be done with it. So you kind of put your bag down, your backpack, briefcase, whatever you carry, walk in the door, drop your bag. And then you slide into some comfy sweatpants. You throw a frozen pizza in the oven and you fall into the couch, perhaps with a glass of wine. And then you watch an old TV series on Netflix. Drop a 1 in the chat if this sounds at all remotely familiar. Yeah, it's good to know that I'm among friends here. And the ones are just coming in so hot, I can't even keep up with them. So if you think you're the only one dropping a 1 in the chat right now, it is, it's filled with ones. Everyone is kind of feeling this way and has had this, feeling. Absolutely. Yep. Great. So here's what happened. You didn't seek recovery throughout the day. You powered through, right? You got everything done. You were incredibly productive, right? You know, the way that we've been socialized, you would be applauded for how hard you worked that day. You powered through, but then you crashed. Or if you're my child, you can see how he crashes. He crashes on with his giant dog on a giant dog bed with his tiny cat. So you crash. Now, this is going to happen sometimes. And I am certainly not bad mouthing frozen pizza, wine, or binge watching TV. Like, this is 2021, and we have needed all 3 of those things in the past year of our lives. But if this becomes our norm, day after day after day, and this is how our daily lives look week after week, you're probably going to start feeling you'll probably start to feel disappointed that you're not eating healthy, for example, right? You might start to feel down on yourself because you're not doing anything useful with your personal time, so it feels. You might wake up each morning feeling resentful that you didn't get to the laundry or the dishes, or you never got those thank you notes out, right? You never got those thank you notes, out the way that you wanted, and you feel disappointed and you feel bad about that. And then what? Well, you're probably definitely going to conclude that you have not been taking time to recharge and recover throughout each workday, and you are suffering from the neurological blowback of those habits. No, you're not going to think those. No. Instead, when you sink into that couch, or you rip open that pizza box for the second or third or fourth or 10th time that week, or when you wake up the next day and you have unbelievable resentment about that laundry, you're going to think, my job is sucking the life out of me. My job is consuming all of my energy. And then you're probably going to think, ugh, I really need a vacation. And the cycle continues. So set an intention to build recovery time into your day. So think every 60 to 90 minutes, every single day. Now, I would love it if that meant we could take an hour-long meditation break 5 times a day, right? You could all just be meditating and taking all these recovery breaks throughout the day, and it would just be amazing. And we would, all work in fields of cotton candy, and we'd be so relaxed. But I have a feeling that some of our bosses and some of our families might have something to say about that. So what I'm talking about is a quick 3 to 5 minute break every hour or hour and a half of work, right? It could mean taking a little walk, grabbing some water. It could mean, checking in on social media, following up on something. It could mean just sitting at your desk for 2 minutes with your eyes closed. And then take a breath, exhale, get back to work. Now, if you all want to give this a shot, try it on Monday, right? Try it on Monday, and you still crash at the end of the day, and you're like, well, Jenny didn't know what she was talking about. That didn't work. Commit to 4 weeks, right? It takes time. Like, think of your brain, the way that we think of the rest of the parts of our body, right? I wouldn't walk into the gym and do one sit-up and then be frustrated that I didn't magically have abs after, right? Have defined abs after one sit-up, right? I have to do the work, right? Our bodies change and respond when they are put under repeat stress, right? I'm talking about positive stress. So challenge yourself to this. Give it 4 weeks. It takes time to change habits and to see those changes happen, right? You didn't get to that place in a single day, right? You didn't get to that place of feeling kind of burned out in that one single day. So think about it like this workout regimen for your brain. Because, like I said, you won't get killer abs after one day at the gym, but a month of crunches, you're probably going to have like a pretty good, darn good start. And I want to check in with the chat here. So someone says a challenge is changing our work culture. Absolutely, Andrea, to be more accepting of those mental breaks, or having 45-minute meetings to allow for those kind of environmental breaks between meetings. So it doesn't currently. So a lot of the things that help us stay connected in this remote, kind of remote work world that we're in, have actually been a little bit, makes it harder to practice the things that I'm talking about today. Because, we have shared calendars where someone can see you're available. And so to the extent that you can, try to, even build in available time and block out time on your calendar. Someone shares, is the 60 to 90 minute guidance the same for kids? Currently toying with the schedule for my virtual learner. So kids actually need recovery breaks more frequently than adults. So depending on the age of your child, I would look more at like 45 to 60-minute breaks. And children tend to benefit from having something kind of active that is a complete mental transition. So if they're, sitting on their Chromebooks and they're doing math, then maybe taking a break to, do something, stimulate another part of their brain. So that could be a snack break. It could mean walking outside and taking a quick little walk. It could mean going and playing and getting dirty for a few minutes and then coming back in. But yeah, children tend to need that break a little bit more frequently to seek that recovery. And so I encourage you, these are all great points and great questions. And please, if you have questions as we go along, please drop them in the chat for me. But if you're a boss or a leader or a manager, I think you need to practice this yourself, right? Set the example, but also build it into the expectations you have for your team. I promise you that it will result in higher productivity and better job satisfaction. And it's such a small investment, but the return can really be infinite. So here's one thing to think about. So my coworkers that I work with here in the office every day, I tend to work at odd times because we have a very flexible kind of schedule. Um, kind of a flexible schedule here in the office. So there are times that I'm catching up on something, in the evening or something like that. So I kind of break my workday up like that. But just because I have made the choice or I needed to catch up on something, in the evening, I question, I found myself, I would just send an email, right? Or send messages to my coworkers or to people that I worked with. And it didn't occur to me until, just a few months ago that, oh gosh, they're getting a notification from someone who I think, is technically their boss. They, technically responsible for them as my coworkers. And they're getting emails from me late at night. Am I setting an expectation that I think they should be responding to my email? So even just scheduling those emails to go the next morning at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, that way I'm not bugging them. So that's one little thing that I could do as a leader to change that practice. And sometimes I forget to do that and they still get a late email from me or an odd-houred email. But I've tried to not do that anymore because I didn't want to unintentionally set a tone that I somehow expect just because I'm, catching up on that email I didn't get to, that I'm going to expect that they should be doing that as well. Yes, I'm going to check the chat here real quick. Yep. So Felicia shares a great strategy that she and her director will stop and just talk about their personal lives for 10 minutes and then kind of get back to work. Yep, absolutely. Having that kind of built-in time. I'm fortunate I have a co-working space in our office. We're all open. So we get to have lots of those little breaks where we kind of, here's a picture of my kids and kind of showing those things. So those breaks get built in pretty naturally here in my office, and I'm really glad for that. Melanie asked a good question. Suggestions for teachers who have maybe 20 or 25 students who are in the same room with them at the time. So when you're kind of needing to take those breaks. Yeah, I definitely suggest if there's a way for you to include your students in that, then do that. It could kind of become part of your classroom routine, if that makes sense. It also, it doesn't necessarily have to be relaxation. It could also just be a shift. So kind of that small break and while you're shifting to another activity. So if it's possible, and if you have enough autonomy in the way you organize your classroom routine, and I'm speaking as an outsider because I am not a childhood educator, but speaking as an outsider, so I'm not sure how feasible it is, but if you can build in the transitions that happen in your instructional time to match up with that, then that might be one way. But it could be, just something as simple as, let's say they're doing a kind of a quiet activity, and then you take, a minute, 2 minutes, drink an entire glass of water, or, kind of have those mental transitions that way. Yeah, someone else shares, Jennifer shares, we have a staff meeting. I'm moving around. We had a staff meeting every Monday, and prior to COVID, it was what we had planned for the week. And now we kind of do mental check-ins, and it's been a really great support, great way to support, each of the families. Great. Yeah, Christine, it looks like Christine has teaching experience, says that she'd take a quick break with the class and do a few deep breaths or stretches. That way everybody could get a break. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Absolutely. Oh, so Andrea asks, suggestions for folks in open design offices who don't gain energy from being in that type of setting. Yeah, absolutely. When we have hired interns and things like that, we always have to have a pretty frank discussion about, we do have an open work environment. I think definitely with leadership can probably set a tone, and just being really transparent when there's things that you just definitely have to do, that you kind of, right now I have earbuds in so that I'm not, disrupting my entire office. So I think, getting comfortable with having those conversations of kind of saying, hey, I'm under a deadline right here. I've got to, crank out this email, and then then I can talk through that with you. And just being really transparent with that is a good strategy. I definitely have some times where I, again, like that deep work that I talked about, writing, all of those things, where I need to be a little more attentive, and I might actually just take my laptop and go somewhere else on those days. Again, I have the flexibility in my office to be able to do that. I know not everyone can, but I think having those conversations is a great start. My office, Andrea, is actually set up where the staff are in one big room, and then we have another room that we use as a meeting space, but our interns actually use that room as well. And earlier this summer, we had an intern, one who was really chatty. She liked to kind of chat while she was working, and she was able to be productive doing that, but it was somewhat distracting for the other interns. So we had to coach them and having co-working conversations on that. So using, headphones or things like that, and just being very deliberate to say, I've got to get this report finished, and then I can touch base with you on your project or something like that. But yeah, it definitely is a different work style, and for some people, it's just not going to be successful for them, or it might just be a bit more of a challenge. Cynthia shares to check out action-based learning and brain breaks for kids. I'm guessing those are resources that you could find out on the interwebs. So great. I love that we're sharing ideas. So if you have other ideas or things to contribute, please drop them in the chat, and I'll make sure that I read them out loud. So let's shift gears here a little bit. I have a little quick poll, so get your ones ready in the chat. Who has ever procrastinated? So drop a 1 if you're in the, who's ever procrastinating. Okay, lots of ones coming in. Who will think about that question and get back to me next week, because you're not quite ready to answer that question? And if you're one of the ones who denies that they have ever procrastinated, just think of a friend who procrastinates a lot. So, whether you're thinking about it for yourself or you're thinking of that friend, we've all put off something or avoided something at some point in our lives. So let's talk about that. Even those of us who are ever punctual and who never miss a deadline still have moments where we save the difficult or challenging task to the last minute. So I'm someone, I grew up on a farm, so I'm very used to getting up early and being really productive first thing in the morning. For example, I also don't like being late. If I'm 10 minutes early to something, I feel like I'm late. And so I recognize that in myself. So I'm not talking necessarily about that, are you punctual, are you not punctual, all those things. Even I, as someone who likes to be early, I like to be efficient, I still have moments where we save the difficult or challenging task to the last minute, right? We've all done that. Now, here's why. When we think of what we need to do, if you're a list person, if you're thinking about the list of all the things you need to do, those heavy tasks, the ones that maybe feel a little scary to us, or the ones that are going to take a lot of mental energy, or ones that we just maybe don't enjoy, those heavy tasks, the ones that we've tied emotions to, whatever it is, the big ones, they tend to slide, they kind of fall down to the bottom, because we are creatures. I'm going to give you some insight into this. This is my theory. We are creatures of habit, and we tend to crave positive feedback. It's actually one of the ways our brains learn. So if you're, studying the adolescent brain, that kind of positive feedback is one of the best ways for learning. And I'm not talking about giving someone a reward. I'm saying, when you solve a problem, that creates that positive feedback loop for you. That also tends to be why adolescent brains are so conditioned to learn from their peers, like to learn behaviors, emotions, regulation, all those things from their peers. And that comes a lot easier to them, to that adolescent brain, than it does to, get that instruction from people that they appear to be like an authority figure. We kind of crave that positive feedback, that intrinsic positive feedback loop. And even when that positive feedback loop comes from within, right? It doesn't have to be external kudos or anything like that. Think about it. How good does it feel to cross off every task on your to-do list, right? How good does that feel? Drop an exclamation point in the chat if you've ever kind of had a quiet little self-celebration when you've crossed off everything on your list. Okay, yep, lots of cheers here. It feels amazing, someone says. Feels good. We give ourselves a little pat on the back. You can all do that right now. Give yourself a little pat on the back. So when we're looking at a list or a pile of things that we need to do, we tend to put those small, so easy, I could do it in my sleep kind of tasks. We tend to put those at the top, right? Because we believe that achieving those tasks is going to help us be more motivated for the bigger projects that have sunk all the way to the bottom of that list or that pile, right? We're kind of, okay, I'm going to get on a roll here with all these small tasks, and then I'm going to, then I'll be able to have all my plate cleared, and then I'll be able to focus on that big task. The problem is that the little things keep getting added to the list, and that big thing that sunk all the way to the bottom never really seems to get done, because there's always these other things that happen. So let's use this tendency to our advantage. So take a few minutes, right, to break down your large project or task into smaller pieces. We can trick ourselves here. Like, if we know about this stuff, if we know that this is how our brains tend to work, let's take advantage of that, and let's trick ourselves into that. So for me and my work, the thing that slides to the bottom every single time, that I dread as if it were a monster jumping out of underneath my bed at me, is writing grant applications. I hate it. No one told me when I became a social worker that a big part of my job would be like finding money so that we could actually do social work. No one told me that when I was in social worker school. So it doesn't mean that I don't believe in our work and that I don't want to seek these, funding and development opportunities. I actually have a lot to say about our work and our goals. I'm really proud of the organization that I work with and the people that I work with, but the stakes are so high, right? My agency, my organization's future depends, at least to a certain degree, on me doing a good job of talking with funders and doing a good job with those grants. So those grants feel really, really heavy to me, right? So not only are they just kind of big and sluggish, there's a lot of pieces to them, but they feel, I've tied a lot of emotion to them because I care about the work that we do. I care about the people I work with, and those feel so heavy to me. So it's very easy for me to let them sink to the bottom of every single to-do list that I make. I can let them continue to be that thing that I'll finish when I get all of my other work done, so that I can focus without the distraction of all of that other work. But you know what I'm going to say. That other work, those other things are never going to stop. There will always be reports and meetings and emails and other projects that come up, other fires. So how do we do this? How can we take advantage of this? How can we kind of trick our brain a little bit here? The trick is to break down those big projects into smaller and easier tasks. So, right, we all know we like to take off these little bite-sized things and feel successful, get that positive feedback. So rather than saying, I'm going to write that grant application today and continue to quiver at the enormity of that undertaking so that I avoid it, instead I'm going to say, this morning I'm going to work on the budget computation, and this afternoon I'm going to work on the budget narrative. And tomorrow I'm going to describe the projected outcomes, and so on and so on. I might even actually put those things in my calendar. I might create a calendar invite that says, budget computation, and then I'll put something else that says budget narrative, so that I'm breaking this down. This is actually my favorite tactic for accomplishing those big tasks. Now, there are lots and lots of theories and methods out there for organizing and prioritizing. I'm an expert of none. I know a little bit about a lot of them, but one that I really like, and maybe you're familiar with it, it's actually called the Eisenhower method or the Eisenhower matrix. So President Eisenhower had a habit of organizing problems or work into 4 categories that he laid out into a 4-part grid. So the first were items that were classified as urgent and important. So urgent and important. These were done right away. The second fell into a category of important but not urgent. And he delegated, so those were planned out for later. So important and not urgent, those were planned out later. The third was important but not urgent, and he delegated those tasks. And the final quadrant were those tasks that were neither important nor urgent, and those were completely eliminated. So I think you can probably see on the screen that grid there. So if it's important and urgent, That's something maybe that needs to be done right away. In my work, I work in child welfare, so you can imagine what falls into that green box. And those are things that don't wait. Those are things that get done right now. And then we were talking about important but not urgent. We're going to do those things later. Not important but urgent. Those are the things that I might need to delegate to someone else to take care of if it's just a matter of filing something or something like that. And then not important and not urgent, of course, we're going to try and eliminate those tasks if possible. I know we can't always do that in every workplace or every setting. So there are other variations and versions of this matrix. I really like to think of in terms of the quadrant method in my workplace. I work for a really small agency, and each of us wears many, many hats. So this is actually a great way for me to figure out what I need to do right away, and then help me figure out what loads I could possibly share with my colleagues. And it sounds like some of you also work in pretty small organizations. So this is a great way to avoid feeling like you're kind of drowning in that work. Another really great trick, particularly if you're a list person, and this works for you personally or professionally, if you're it's that time of year where you're starting to think about professional goals and development. But if you're a list person, I encourage you to create a master list and then a to-do list. And if any of you like bullet journaling, this kind of aligns with some of those bullet journaling techniques. So the master list could be for the entire year, it could be for the month or for the week or all of those things. You could have, kind of various sections of your master list. But then you break those items down into smaller to-do lists. So also on your to-do list are all the things that come out throughout the day or the week. And even if you aren't into lists, think about these more as areas of focus. So quick example, not work related, but quick example, I've been practicing yoga for about 16 years. It actually started out something I was doing it for exercise, right? I was all about going to the most intense classes. It was all about the physical nature, the physical exercise of practicing yoga. And over time, as I, kind of settled in, probably as I got older, I couldn't do all those really wild things anymore. So as I got older, it became less about the physical piece of it, the physical goals, and more about those moments of clarity in my own practice. And so over time, as I started to learn more about yoga, I realized how ignorant I was to the history of yoga and the teachings and, all of the cultural significance. And so I wanted to build a better understanding of my own daily practice, but also to be, to have a greater appreciation and kind of honor, all the various layers that were at play here. So I set this goal or intention or whatever you want to call it to learn and understand more about yoga beyond just the asana or the physical practice. So that was on my master list, you might say, was learn more about yoga, be more appreciative, learn more about the culture of yoga, the history, I wanted to learn about all those things. Now that's pretty big, right? That's one of those things that it's kind of, oh yeah, I meant to do that. I never really did it. But when I break that down into pieces that I could achieve on things I could take action on, maybe it looked like reading a few books about the history of yoga, learning about and trying to honor and learn more about and have more appreciation for Indian culture. Later on, I completed yoga teacher training, for example, because I really wanted to learn all of the different pieces. Now, I don't teach yoga. I think I would be a terrible yoga teacher, but completing all those courses on ideology and anatomy helped me move that needle in the larger goal that I had of just really wanting to learn more and to have a better appreciation and a better understanding of this practice that had become a part of my daily life. Now, I am painstakingly describing these decisions and these activities, and I'm using words like tasks and lists and master lists, boring words, but that does not mean that any of these things actually have to be written down, right? I didn't write down anywhere, I want to learn more about yoga. I didn't write that down anywhere. That is not on a piece of paper somewhere. And so I'm not saying that you have to write them down. I'm not saying that you need to even neurotically plan every single part of your life and your time, right? You don't have to do that. It's actually quite the opposite. It's really about conditioning yourself and just giving yourself permission to think about how you might move in the direction of goals for yourself. So imagine that you wanted to learn a new language, let's say, and you might often say, oh, I really want to learn French or Spanish or Mandarin. And, years and years and years go by. And let's say you're visiting Madrid and you think, oh, I always meant to learn Spanish. I just never got around to it. Has anyone ever had something they've never gotten around to, you've always wanted to do? Drop a 1 in there. Tell me what it is that you've always wanted to do and you've never gotten around to it. Drop that in the chat. Yep, seeing some ones here. Travel the world, play violin, learn Spanish, EMDR certification, painting, absolutely. Rock climbing, snowboarding, learning sign language. Oh, you guys have some good goals. Travel Greece, go to Europe, finishing my Mustang, learning to speak and read and write Welsh, snowboard. Awesome, awesome. Wow, y'all are gonna have like a busy 2022. It sounds like you have a lot to do. Sailing, taking baking classes. Sailing. I'll learn sailing with you. I love sailboats. Fun fact, I love them. They actually make me cry a little bit when I see them because I think they're so beautiful. So they make me emotional, and I desperately think that I want a sailboat, but I've never actually been on a sailboat. So I should probably back up a little bit and actually find someone with a sailboat that I can visit to decide if I think I need a sailboat myself. Someone's learning to sew, writing blogs, launching a YouTube channel. Absolutely. So, right, years and years go by, we're always saying, oh yeah, I always meant to do that. So let's imagine that you wanted to learn Spanish and you're in a Spanish speaking city and you think, gosh, I always meant to learn Spanish. I never got around to it. And so what I'm suggesting that you do with all these things that you've always meant to do or that you wanted to do is to give yourself permission to set goals for that long game, but give yourself permission to make a little progress in the right direction without it feeling like failure, right? Because a lot of times if you say, I really wanted to learn Spanish, and you bought one of those audio, those CDs or something that teaches you Spanish, and you didn't learn Spanish right away, and you're like, I failed at Spanish, and then you're just done. But you can make a little progress in the right direction without it feeling like failure. And if you try something that's not effective, that's also progress because you learned what's not working. So try to do that without becoming overwhelmed. I'm kind of saying, oh, my work is so busy right now. My kids are involved in so much. I don't possibly have time to learn another language. So you just sabotage yourself right from the start. So let's say if your goal, the example I'll use is learning Spanish. So maybe for you, the first step is not enrolling in a Spanish language course. Maybe that is probably overwhelming. You probably are too busy for that. Maybe the first step is watching Latino television or listening to Spanish language podcasts, maybe with some subtitles so you can start to just get an ear for the language. Maybe it's downloading an app on your phone to start learning Spanish words. My son is actually doing this right now. Maybe it's enrolling in a course. Maybe that's your step. And it's okay if you aren't fluent after that first step. You're just moving in the right direction. And it's okay if you're in that space for so long. It's okay if you're in that space for a really long time. Totally fine. You can do that. Is this anyone rethinking some of those things that they put in the chat that, were on there, yeah, I really always meant to do that. I want to do that. And you never really got inside of it. So I hope that you'll be thinking about those things maybe from a little bit different perspective of, oh gosh, what's one little thing that I could do that would kind of put me in that, in that space. Yeah, someone was doing Duolingo. That's what my son is doing, Duolingo. He's like streaking on Duolingo. He's learning a few languages that way. Great. So it's okay if you're in that space for a long time and kind of keep moving forward. So, whew. I'm tired. I don't know if anyone else is. How many of us are like so exhausted that sometimes you just don't want to make a single decision? Like you're so worn out. Yeah, put a 1 in the chat box. Like you're so worn out. You're like, I can't possibly make a decision right now. And if you are feeling alone, there are so many 1s in the chat box right now. It is on fire. Someone said, I think it's yes, but I think that's depression. It could be. So yeah, I'm definitely not here to be anyone's therapist or clinician. Yeah, but you're just exhausted. I actually have a theory that I think that's why those meal delivery services have become so popular. I don't know how many of you have ever done, like the HelloFresh, all those things where they just send you the meal kits. And I think, I think that's how they became so popular, because they take decisions away, like it does the decision making for you, and just comes and gives you pictures. It gives you pictures to make the meals even. And think about that. Nearly every diet routine or fad diet includes meal planning. Have you noticed that? If you're looking for a diet, kind of diets or diet routines, they almost always include meal planning. Why? It's because we're busy creatures. Most families, a lot of families have, two people working outside of the home, and, children to manage, or maybe caring for grandparents and caring for other relatives, all of those things, right? We're busy creatures, and we make huge, big decisions all day long. So not having to think about what to cook feels like a respite from the day, right? Now, I watched an interview a couple of years ago. It's been years ago, but it was when President Obama said that he was always seen, he was kind of telling a joke, that he was always seen in blue or white shirts during his presidency, because he had basically rearranged his entire wardrobe that way, because he said he had to make so many hard decisions every single day that he didn't want to expend his energy making decisions about something as simple as what to wear. Now, that's a pretty good life hack. I am probably never going to limit myself to only blue shirts. I probably am not going to be doing that. But it does make me think about opportunities where I can kind of quasi-automate decisions, either through pre-planning or through delegating. So my husband and I both tend to be like really uninspirational when it comes to throwing together weeknight meals for our family. So we get around this by thinking up meals for the week based on our schedules. We kind of look at the calendar and see who's working late one night, what do the kids have going on. So we think of what meals we're going to have that week, and we make our shopping list from there. And then, I kind of have these thoughtful meal ideas just slapped up on the refrigerator door, and it removes just one of those Tuesday or Thursday night decisions. Now, I don't do this always every week, but I'll tell you, Thursday night Jenny really appreciates Sunday afternoon Jenny, when Sunday afternoon Jenny did this and kind of automated those decisions through the week. So it's just a little extra step and a little bit of time. And just another, kind of idea. Great. And I'm seeing in the chat, lots of you are use those meal kits and take advantage of that kind of built-in automation. Absolutely. So as we start to kind of transition to the last half of our time together, I do want to leave you with a few tips and an obligatory disclaimer. I hope that so far during our time this morning that you have figured out that I am working on it. I don't practice what I preach every time. I don't have everything together. I am learning and adapting based on what I've learned. Earlier I kind of likened recovery habits with the gym. So I kind of challenge all of you to work out your brain and stretch your brain, if you will. And there's lots of ways to do that, right? So for me, the pandemic has unearthed a love of puzzles. Does anyone else like puzzles, or like recently became reacquainted with like jigsaw puzzles? So I've kind of gotten back into them. I even now have a puzzle table in my house. I have a dedicated puzzle table, which is, if that's not the sign of that I'm nearing middle age, that I have a puzzle table in my house, I don't know what is. But I love it. I love the challenge of it, the stillness of it, and having faith that everything fits together eventually. Like, I know that there's no trick in the puzzle. Like it's going to work. It's going to fit together. And I just have to be patient and work through it. It kind of gives my brain a really good workout. Now, you don't have to love working puzzles. My husband actually hates puzzles. He is very agitated by them. Doing a puzzle is not relaxing for him. He gets angry at them. But he's really good at figuring things out. So for example, if something breaks in our house, he's like a handyman detective, and he kind of thrives like solving that problem, figuring it out. And my point here is that for you, it might be something different than it is for me. So, whatever that kind of brain workout is for you, it might be different. Yeah, someone shared in the chat, puzzles kind of have this beginning and an end and this very visible outcome, right? So it's that taking advantage of that positive feedback loop. So whatever it is, Other people share like Legos. Absolutely. Great. Yep. I know we're a Lego household as well. I took my kids and I take a nerdcation every year, where they pick a city, and it has to be a city with some sort of history or something, kind of interesting that they can learn about ahead of time. So they do this nerdcation, and they plan the city, they plan all the stops, they plan everything with it. But over the past couple of years, they have always picked out locations for our nerdcation every year, that has a Legoland at it. So they're always like wanting to get to Legoland when we go on our nerdcation. So we've visited every nerdcation in cities that have Legolands. They've checked almost all of them off, for their annual trips with me. So yeah, I encourage you can do adult nerdcations too. It doesn't have to just be with kids. So here's another example, and a lot of you shared this. I love reading. I can get lost and spend entire days with my nose in a book. It's actually, I very specifically cannot bring novels to my office because I will do no work. I'll hide under my desk and read a book. Fun fact, I don't know if I can show you underneath my desk right now, but I actually have a sandbox under my desk. So my feet are in the sand right now. So I would just sit there with my feet in the sand underneath my desk and read a book all day. I would get no work done. So it's the best thing and the worst thing. And I really like to be reading more than one book at a time. I don't know if anyone else does this. So, in any given week or month, I might be reading something kind of academic, something related to my work. I might be doing some research. I might also be reading a book about a current event or something that's going on in the news. Maybe even reading a history piece on civil rights, or something like that, kind of something salient, something topical. But I also always have going like a fun paperback, like a romance or historical fiction or something like that. Something where it's like embarrassing to show people the cover of it. You kind of want to pretend that you're not reading that book because you're a little embarrassed about it. I always have one of those going on too. And that just, again, challenges, kind of keeps my interest going. And I often read books more than once. Does anyone else do this? Read the same books over and over and over? I do that with The Great Gatsby. It's my favorite book. I have probably read it, I don't know, 60 times in my life. I read it multiple times a year. And that's the cool thing about books, or just literature in general. And even movies, I think. It doesn't change, right? The literature doesn't change. The book doesn't change. The movie doesn't change, but we do, right? Can you think of a movie that you watched as a child and then you watch it as an adult and you're thinking, wow, this is really inappropriate. I should not have watched this as a child. This is not good. Right? Because the movie hasn't changed. Like, we've changed, like the world has changed. We have changed personally. And so the way that we can understand it is constantly evolving. So it is a way to, again, just giving ideas here. What works for me might not work for you, but an idea there for that brain stretching or brain workout that I was talking about. But find what stimulates your thinking and your creativity and your critical thinking, and invest the time for that. Oh, someone wants to know about the sandbox. Someone says, I've got it. The crowds have spoken. They want to know about the sandbox. So yeah, I have a large plastic box under my desk. And the trick to keep sand from getting everywhere is I use a mixture of like sand, like beach sand, and kinetic sand, which kind of, sticks together. So the kinetic sand keeps it from being too messy. So yeah, I highly recommend 10 out of 10 sandbox under your desk if you're a beach goer. So I often, if you ever have a call with me and I'm sitting like this, my feet are definitely in the sand. I'm definitely barefoot. And oftentimes I'll even like put a little extra sunscreen on so that I can kind of like get like all of the sensory overload that I would have at the beach. Like, I'll put a little extra sunscreen on my hands so I can smell the sunscreen, have my feet in the sand. And again, just tricking my brain. We can take advantage and trick our brains a little bit there. So yeah, that's the sandbox story. So if Tennessee is everybody's gonna be running to their hardware stores and buying sand, I'm sorry if there's like a shortage of sand in the near future in Tennessee. Or for those of you that are managers, if you're suddenly seeing sandboxes pop up underneath desks, I apologize. You didn't hear any of this from me. So let's talk about, as we kind of start to think about how we can put this into action. let's talk about how we take care of ourselves just for this last little bit. Has anyone noticed how sexy self-care has become lately? Has anyone thought about that? Like, right, we have a hashtag like self-care Sunday. And sometimes we are like, oh, self-care, but it's like a picture of someone holding a glass of wine. And you're kind of thinking, huh, interesting. But it's become kind of sexy. It's become this luxury thing that we do. Oftentimes, self-care, if you look on Instagram, self-care seems to be quite expensive. I'm not sure if I can afford self-care if it's what I see on Instagram. But let's unpack self-care just a little because it is more than just bubble baths and candles, right? We're going to do a little self-care, self-testing here so you can kind of assess yourself as I'm telling you these stories over the next several minutes. So first question I have is I would like for you to, you'll be using the chat box here, but I'm interested in how is your filter, right? Do you say the things that come to your mind? Do you have a good poker face? So if you think you have a good filter, drop a 1 in the chat. If you think your filter might be broken, drop a 2 in the chat. All right, so we're seeing a good mix here. Some of you have some pretty good filters. I see like a line of 2s. Someone's filter is really broken. All right, cool. So I want to tell you a story, and it's about my husband. Oh, someone says 1 around my kids and a 2 by coworkers. I love the honesty here. That's great. Someone shares, mine gets broken the older I get. Nice. I mean, I'm here for it. So I tell you a story about my husband and my poor husband. Thank goodness he hardly ever sees these talks that I do because he is often the hostage in all my stories. So my husband, he's a fabulous guy. He's wonderful. He's amazing, obviously. I adore him. I've, spent the last 15 years of my life with him. So yeah, very much love him. And he has a lot of strengths. There are a lot of good things about him. One thing that is not his strength is picking up his dirty, smelly, gross socks off the floor. He leaves them in the living room. He'll sit on the couch and he doesn't even take them off with his hands. He pushes them off with his toes and leaves them in these crumpled up, sweaty, smelly, gross little ball on the living room. And as you can imagine, we have many a spirited debate in our house about these socks. So that's the history. I'm just going to set the tone here. That I live in a sea of sweaty, smelly socks, and it's fine. I'm not resentful about it at all. Don't be concerned if I seem resentful. It's fine. So let's imagine this. I have a hard day at work, like one of those days. Maybe I powered through a little bit. Maybe I didn't have as much time for recovery as usual. Maybe I had a lot of really tough emotional stuff, right? I have an emotional job, job with high emotions, and so let's say I have one of those days. I'm kind of exhausted. I'm kind of mentally spent from the day. And I get home, walk into my house, and there is a pile of dirty dishes in the sink because why wouldn't there be a pile of dirty dishes in the sink on the day that I had a really bad day? I really wanted to come home and just do the dishes. As soon as I walked inside, that was really great. So I walk in, I'm instantly feeling undervalued and unappreciated, right? That's kind of how I'm internalizing this. Stay with me here. I'm sure I'm not the only jerk on this call right now. You've all probably related to these feelings. So this is how I feel. I walk in, and looks like somebody's has similar husbands to me as mine. Someone says my husband and your husband must be related. So I walk in, and that's I kind of assess the kitchen situation, and I walk into our TV room, and my husband's there, has the TV on, and he has the TV on, and he's sitting there like maybe scrolling on his phone, and he's kicked back, and there it is. I see it. Those dirty, smelly, gross socks on the floor. And what's worse, yesterday's socks are on the floor as well, right beside them. And I lose it. I say, I cannot believe this. I just had a terrible work day. I come home, there's piles of dishes. The kids are doing who knows what down in their rooms. And here you are, of course, sitting on the couch, propped back, relaxed, watching TV, and there are your dang socks on the floor. Why are you so lazy? Now, do you think I meant that? Just say yes or no in the chat. Do you think I meant that, what I said? A lot of you are saying no, the votes are coming in. I gotta tell you, you're damn right I meant it. I absolutely meant it. I just didn't mean to say it, right? So it's not necessarily my filter was broken because I meant that, right? I actually do, I do feel undervalued when I'm picking up someone else's socks. Like that's a valid feeling that I'm allowed to have. Now, what happened there is that I don't think I necessarily overreacted. I easily reacted, right? Because I didn't have time to consider any other thing other than just how I was feeling in that moment. And so then I said this thing that I didn't really mean to say, right? There would be other ways for me to have a conversation with someone about the socks. So I kind of had this communication, breakdown that happened. And I easily reacted. I always get a little concerned when we tell people, oh, you're overreacting. Because especially when we say that with kids, if a child's upset about something, we say, you're really overreacting right now. And how invalidating is that to, the way that they're feeling? And instead I say, gosh, it seems like we're easily reacting to this. Let's slow down and unpack this a little bit. And so we have to think through this a little bit and, kind of unpack, why are we easily reacting? What are we doing there? Now, I'm going to frame this conversation in this concept of resilience, because I think part of self-care is building our own capacity for resilience. And resilience, if you are, if you've studied, trauma-informed care, any of this, resilience is a pathway to healing for trauma. It doesn't replace any of the other, evidence-based work. It doesn't replace therapy. It doesn't replace any of those things that you can do to recover from trauma. But resilience is one pathway to heal from trauma. Resilience is also one way that we can manage that bigger picture self-care, one way that we can kind of manage and regulate ourselves. And the interesting thing about resilience is it is dynamic. Resilience is not like your college GPA, right? A GPA is like you start off with so much water in a cup, and when you spill some water out of the cup, you can never get it back. That's actually not how resilience works. You can keep filling up that cup. You can even get a bigger cup. So we can actually grow our capacity for resilience, right? We all have natural tendencies and our own experiences that have shaped that. Now you'll see I'm doing this with my hands because I really like to talk about resilience in terms of space. So when I'm talking about resilience, I'm talking about the space that exists between a stimulus and our reaction to that stimulus. So let's imagine you're driving your car, and I assume that all of you are really safe drivers. So this is purely you imagining. But you're driving your car, you're driving to work, and then it happens. Some jerk pulls out in front of you immediately. They pull out in front of you, and you have to slam on your brakes, and then maybe you communicate with them with some gestures, or perhaps honking your horn. You might even say, oh, like, what did and you say something kind of mean and angry that I probably shouldn't say on a recorded video call, but you say something really angry, use very colorful terminology, and then you might even start like assigning qualities to their character. Like you might say, oh gosh, like what an ungrateful, selfish, self-absorbed driver is in that car. I bet he doesn't even call his grandmother on the weekends. He's probably a terrible person. He probably is that person who eats all the grapes at the grocery store and doesn't pay for them, therefore stealing the grapes. So you kind of assign all these qualities to their character. Right, so here it is, stimulus, someone pulling out in front of you. Reaction, no space. You react immediately to it, right? That's really tight. And so when we don't have that space in the middle there, we lose those opportunities to consider alternative hypotheses, to deploy our coping skills, which hopefully we have, to think critically, right? Even about that, right? So instead, maybe when that stimulus happens there, we need to think about, oh gosh, all the things that you could think of, the reasons why, besides just he's a jerk. That it might be he's on his way to the hospital, she's in labor. It could be, maybe they're just really distracted today. They're having a rough morning themselves. Maybe my husband, when he didn't pick his socks up, he also had a rough day, right? Because I was reacting and like reflective of my feelings and not really considering what his day was like. Again, no critical thinking because I quickly reacted. I didn't have a lot of space there. And maybe one alternative hypothesis when you're driving your car is that that person pulled out in front of you because you're going 15 miles an hour over the speed limit and they didn't think you were going to catch up to them that fast, right? All of these things. So I'm not saying that we should excuse unsafe driving, right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when we constantly have this quick reaction and we don't build this space of resilience, and someone in the chat calls it kind of this cushion, it has an impact on us. So that day that someone pulled out in front of you, you get to your office, and of course someone's parked in your parking spot, because why wouldn't they be? Of course, on the day I really need to get to work on time, they're parked in my spot. Why wouldn't they be? And then you walk into your office and you find out that 2 of your coworkers aren't coming to work that day because you'd love to do their work in addition to your own. That's exactly the kind of day you want to have today. And then you go and the coffee machine's broken, because why wouldn't it be? The whole world's out to get you today, right? Are you feeling stressed out just listening to me talk right now? Because I can feel my chest tightening as I'm saying those things. So when we don't work on having that space, it also has a way of sabotaging our day and our mind and our energy. Remember, we're not just managing our time, we're managing our energy as well. And when we're under distress, we are going to resort to our most easily accessible reactions. When we're under stress, right? Someone's sharing, it kind of leads to that anxiety. Absolutely. We think it's because we need a better filter, but what we really need to do is kind of train our thoughts a little bit. That's that brain training I was talking about. So I'm going to tell you a story. So all I've done today is just tell you stories. So I'm going to tell you stories. Yep, someone mentioned like self-talk. Yep, it could be self-talk of just kind of saying, oh, hey, hang on, and just saying out loud maybe a couple of alternate hypotheses of why this person pulled out in front of you. It could be just that quick. So yeah, Chris shares kind of self-talk as an example. So I tell the story, back before the pandemic, believe it or not, when I would do talks like this, I would actually get on these big metal tubes that fly up into the sky, and they would transport me across the country or across the ocean to go and talk to people like this, before I was just doing it in a computer screen. So I spent a lot of time in the airport, a lot of time alone in the airport, and me being left to my own devices can get a little questionable. So I'm in the airport and I'm walking to the airport. I'm kind of a seasoned traveler. I know what's up. I got all my stuff ready. I've like so fast through security. I'm kind of got it down. Pretty proud of it. And I'm walking, and then I can hear this person coming, like click, 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 click. Like you can hear them coming before you see them coming, because it's a woman, and she's in stilettos, and she's just dressed to the nines, and she's carrying designer luggage, because why wouldn't she be carrying designer luggage? Like, of course she has designer luggage. And, I'm kind of thinking to myself, who does she think she is? Coming here, gosh, like, is she ready for the runway? Like, the model runway, not the airport runway. Like, I'm making all the, to myself, I'm not saying these things out loud. I do have some control, but I'm saying these things to myself. And then I might think, gosh, what an idiot to come to an airport looking like that. And then I even start to think, I hope she's not on my plane, because that is not responsible, safe footwear. And if our plane goes down, I don't want to have to haul her stiletto butt off the plane. Like, I hope she has some sneakers somewhere. Right. You're thinking all these things. It's kind of, I call it my snark roll, like kind of snarky. And, you kind of think that. Now, why am I doing that? Right now, you all could be sitting there making some assessments about my own self-esteem, and I'm giving you an example just, in my own experiences as someone whose gender identity is woman. That's kind of a common experience. And I think a lot of times women in particular might be socialized to that. The example in your head might be something different, where you jump to conclusions or whatever it is. So think of that example. But I've set myself up. When I let myself automatically make all of those assumptions about this stranger that I see in the airport or in the store or wherever, I've made all of these assumptions, and I'm giving myself anxiety. I'm feeling bad about myself. I'm starting to question, why did I wear such a frumpy outfit? Even though I'm projecting anger, right? I'm kind of, internalizing that. So instead, what if I forced myself to change my perspective? One pathway to resilience is changing your perspective. So when you encounter those situations, and Chris gave the, kind of called it self-talk in the chat. When you encounter those situations, I challenge you to change your perspective and think about it a little differently, and do it very, very intentionally. So when I, start to have that reaction to the beautiful woman in the airport who makes me feel, frumpy by comparison, instead, I'm going to think, gosh, what a great outfit she put together. I bet she's really creative. Maybe she's an artist. Like, she seems to have a good eye for, visual eye. And, I wonder where she got that luggage. Maybe she got it on sale. Again, I don't have to say any of these things out loud. This is just me and my brain having a conversation here. And I'm probably going to say, she probably definitely has sneakers in that carry-on. She was just coming from a really important meeting and she had to rush to the airport to make it on time. And she's probably going to change into her, Chuck Taylors when she gets back at the gate, whatever it is I'm saying. Now, I don't know if any of those things are true. I don't know if she's an artist. I don't know if she just came from a meeting and she's in a hurry. But the thing is, I didn't know if any of the negative things I was thinking were true either. But all those negative things, right, they made me feel bad about myself. So yeah, and someone says, why not compliment the stranger? Yeah, you actually absolutely could. If you kind of say, oh, gosh, those are great shoes you're wearing. That's great luggage. That's great. Pass that on, pass that light on. Absolutely. But even if you don't, you can, just that simple perspective shift, could change. When you're doing the driving the car example, right, to just take that time and slow down, build that space, stretch that space a little bit, consider an alternative hypothesis of, hey, that person is maybe having a rough day and they just didn't see me. They were a little distracted and they didn't see me. And maybe I'm going to do the little, like steering wheel wave thing where you're kind of like, it's all right. I got you, friend. But challenge your perspective a little bit. That's one pathway to resilience. And just like I talked about recovery earlier on, you have to do this over and over and over, right? You kind of have to keep doing this. And you can do this with other people. Now, some of you might be coworkers on here, so just think to yourself about, if you work with people who it just always seems to dive into a negative space, things always seem to end up kind of negative, right? It can get tough you're saying, okay, Jenny, like I'm going to try and have this space, but people kind of pull me in. Has anyone ever been in a situation where you were perfectly fine about a policy change in your workplace, and then your coworker came into your office and started complaining about it, and by the end of that conversation, you were equally angry about the policy change? And then afterwards, you're kind of thinking, I don't actually really care about it. I just kind of hopped on the train there. So we can perspective shift with other people as well. So we can kind of say, I hear what you're saying, and that definitely is frustrating. I actually heard that one of the reasons this policy change happened is because of X, Y, and Z good reason that whatever it is. And you can just offer that little kind of, here's a different perspective that you might not have known about, and talk about it that way. And it's easy to say, oh gosh, this policy change happened at work and my office mate Lucy is overreacting again. And instead, think in terms of easily reacting to things and how could you contribute to other perspectives that might shape that and change that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're responsible for kind of the dynamics and energy of other people, but it does have an impact on you in your work. So kind of contributing those counterbalances is one little thing that you could do that might help. Another great way to kind of hop on these pathways of resilience is basic mindfulness. Now, I'll tell you, I told you I've done yoga for many, many years, and I really only focus on the physical parts of yoga. Now, the other piece to this story is I thought that kind of the non-physical parts, the non-workout parts of yoga were I was a little judgmental about like mindfulness and all of this kind of brain, all this kind of stuff. I was kind of like, I thought it was a little hokey. I wasn't really seeing the hype kind of thing. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I was attending a conference as an attendee, and I signed up for this workshop on mindfulness, on building a mindfulness practice. And I'd like to say that I am a good person, but sometimes I'm not. And I fully intended to go into that workshop and kind of make fun of everything. Like quietly, I was going to make fun of all the like kooky things that the presenter said about mindfulness and all this, because I was like, I'm too busy. I'm too, too important to do mindfulness, all those things that we think. And again, I try to be the person who'll say what everyone else is thinking, but actually I'll say it out loud. So it's okay if you are feeling these things, like we're among friends here. So I walk in, I'm feeling kind of like I don't want to be here. I'm not really buying into it. And then I thought, Jenny, you are a giant jerk. You would not appreciate it if someone was sitting in one of your workshops that you research and develop and study instructional design and all of these things. You would not feel good if you knew that someone was walking into your workshop like that. So I decided to just be present. I kind of set an intention for myself when I walked in. I was just going to be present. And let me tell you, that presenter, she did something tricky. And I laugh about this because that presenter and I have gone on to become friends. She did something kind of tricky. She wasn't talking about mindfulness in this kind of backwards way, or in this way that made it seem really out there, really new age. She was actually talking about the science of mindfulness and the science behind it. And I'm a giant nerd, so that was speaking my language. Like, I love studying the brain and how our brain works, how we emotionally respond to things, how that can affect the way that we code our memories. I love learning about that stuff, about regulation and all of this kind of nerd stuff. So she starts speaking my language. And then that inspired me to want to continue to learn more about mindfulness, because it's so much more than just, meditating in a corner, right? There's so much more to that. I encourage all of you to make some time to independently learn about it a little bit. But I left that workshop and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do mindfulness. I'm going to do this. And I said, I'm going to do it every day. Actually, I'm going to do mindfulness every single day, because I still hadn't quite gotten to like the real piece of it. But I'm going to have a mindfulness break, or kind of a meditative mindfulness break, every single day. And I started off and I said, I'm going to do it for 10 minutes every day. So I was like, I'm going to go sit quietly and do a meditation for 10 minutes. And then I realized I could not sit still for 10 whole minutes. So I had to, again, forward, I had to start with 7 minutes. So I started with 7 minutes, and I had to use an app. I had to use like the Headspace and all those apps, because I just couldn't focus. I was too distracted for it. So I started doing it every single day. And I tell you today that since I set that intention and since I started doing that, I have never missed a day of doing that. Now, it doesn't always look pretty. It doesn't always look Instagrammable. It doesn't always look #Sunday mindful. Like, it doesn't always look like that. Sometimes it's me, taking a 10-minute walk in the middle of my workday, walking outside. Sometimes it's me going and sitting, on a bench and just taking a couple of deep breaths. But I really was able to understand the impact that mindfulness practice could have on so many facets of my life. And so I encourage you all. It looks different for everyone. I know some people have really strong, like very traditional seeming meditation practices. And I know for some people it's more of a walking meditation, or taking a walk, or for some people it's going for a run. For some people it's just sitting quietly, or maybe kind of curling up with something. So I encourage you all to, we don't have time today and the time left to really deep dive into mindfulness so much, but there's it's such an emerging field in the literature, and there's lots of new and exciting research around mindfulness and the benefits that it can have. It seems like there were some teachers on the line. So even I know that there's tons of tips out there that you can find by like just searching the web for mindfulness tips for students, and things that you can just build into the day. So I really encourage you to do that. I love that so many of you are giving me tips about the laundry situation with my husband as well in the chat box. Someone shares kind of a small basket there to kind of collect them, right? I would just kind of lean into it a little bit and have a basket. So I'm loving all of the tips. Thank you, everyone, for the tips. I will probably will not employ them, because I guess I like irritating my husband a little bit with it. But yeah, if someone, my email and my website will come up on the end. And if you, someone's asking for mindfulness stuff, in the very end, I'll flash my website and my email address up there. And there's actually, I have some stuff hyperlinked on my website that has some of my favorite books, favorite articles on mindfulness and all the stuff we're talking about today. So you'll be able to grab that at the end. That's a good question though. My next kind of tip is to think about gratitude. Um, so we're polite. I assume that you're all polite, well-mannered folks. I know that we just met, and I am only seeing you through your chats, but you all seem to be polite and compassionate people. But how often do we actually practice gratitude? Like really, really practice gratitude. And I'm not just saying, saying thanks to the person who hands you your coffee, but something that you're really, really grateful for. So I want you to think back, in the past 24 hours of your day and put one thing that has happened or has come about in the last 24 hours that you're grateful for, and just add that into the chat and I'll read a couple of them out loud. And this does not have to be grand. Like it can be like your family, your faith, your health, your friends, but it could also be very, very, think of something very, very small. So for me this morning, I had a little bit of quiet time. I got up earlier than everyone else after my workout, and I was standing outside. It's kind of a cool morning, and I was holding my coffee, like my hands around my warm cup of coffee, and was feeling, gosh, like I'm grateful, like to just, kind of having a moment of gratitude for having my, hands, it was kind of chilly out, around this warm cup of coffee. So very, very specific. Yeah, lots of you are putting in here, grateful for gas in my car, coworkers, being seen and heard, getting a text from a brother, for a sibling, roommates, the cooler temperature this morning, waking up. Lots of folks are grateful for their spouse, their family, fresh watermelon, grateful for their dog. Goldie, she definitely helps me with mindfulness. Sitting, kind of petting their animal. 7-month-old son stayed asleep while I got caught up on work. Yep. New connections, grateful for support. Awesome, awesome. So I encourage you to think about this and just be really intentional with it. Now, and if you want to share it with someone, if you want to share and give gratitude to someone else, please do that every chance you can. But also, it can just be internal. You can think about, just like I had that moment this morning when I was holding my cup of coffee of like, oh, I'm grateful for this moment. If you want to super nerd out on it, you can have a gratitude list every day. I have a good friend. I volunteer with the Make-A-Wish Foundation as a volunteer wish granter. And when you volunteer for that organization, you volunteer in pairs. So my volunteer partner, she actually does a gratitude list every single day. She wakes up and like right on her bedside notebook, she has writes down 3 things she's grateful for every single day, which I think is so cool. So she's often sharing those things when we're, going to see the kids that we volunteer with together. She's often sharing those things, and it's so nice to have those conversations. So that's one tip, just practice gratitude, inject a little gratitude into your day. Maybe that can be something you do during that recovery break or something like that. Yeah, someone shares, Michelle was returning from vacation and they were grateful for airport security and airline personnel, and kind of saying just, I appreciate you so much. Appreciate you with them. I have a Rotary friend who often says he'll end phone calls by saying, all right, appreciate you, thanks, that kind of thing. So yeah, being mindful, being intentional about it. And that brings me to this last piece of just being kind of intentional and taking intentional pauses. Now these could be grand. I would love it if you all went on, if everybody once a year got to go on some self-discovery retreat where you get to have this intentional pause. I get that's probably not realistic, but taking intentional pauses. I mentioned when I first started this talk today that I have kind of my own personal story, right? I have, things that have happened in my personal life and with my family and with my birth family that have a great potential to impact the work that I do, right? It could impact it positively, negatively. It could impact it in a kind of a neutral way. It could just inform something that I'm doing. But I have to be very intentional about that. If I find myself having a reaction, like an easy reaction to something that comes up in a case, I have to stop and pause for a moment, because that's my responsibility, right? To stop and pause for a moment and think about, okay, am I looking at this through the lens of my own personal feelings about this or my own personal experiences. So I have to be really intentional. So I take this part of my job very seriously and this part of this work very seriously, and being very intentional and kind of, I call it taking self-inventory, because I have to be careful about that. You know, sometimes I find myself getting a little mama bearish with kids where their situations are somewhat similar to my son's. And I have to be really, really cautious on that and kind of take a step back and do that self inventory, take the pause, do the work, and unpack how I'm reacting to that. Because, you know, sometimes it might be right on, but then sometimes it might not. And then sometimes it might not actually affect the way that I'm doing my work, but it certainly affects me emotionally later on. So I need to take that intentional pause and kind of sometimes just going through and naming those things and kind of saying, okay, today felt especially hard because this child's situation mirrors one that's very personal to you. And so let's kind of, you know, again, that self-talk. And I'm being very nerdy about it and saying it out loud. I don't actually say these things out loud to myself. Those are the thoughts that you have throughout the day. So when I'm talking about self-care, I'm talking about all this stuff. I'm not talking about pedicures and bubble baths, and I'm not knocking them either. Please go get all the bubble baths you need, light all the candles. But I think that those are actually techniques for relaxation, and we've just started calling them self-care, probably because we like to put price tags on things as a society. So, you know, those are things you pay for, right? All those things that we kind of call self-care. But I think those are all tools. That's all kind of noise for relaxation. You know, me time, you know, keep doing those things. Those are important. But when I say self-care, I am talking about the actual care of self. Things like sleeping and eating and getting enough whatever physical activity your body needs, taking those recovery breaks. That's what I mean when I'm talking about self-care. You know, how many of you have ever worked the entire day, powered through the entire day, and then you realize that you hadn't peed all day long, right? That you hadn't gone to the bathroom. That's self-care, taking care of your environmental needs throughout the day, keeping your body healthy, getting enough sleep, all of those things. We need those things to make our bodies and our brains work properly, right? You have to treat yourself as if you're someone you are responsible for helping. Highly efficient and highly effective people don't shortchange themselves on prioritizing their basic needs. And if you're someone like me who works in a human services field or works with people for a living, self-care is not a luxury. Please underline this twice, circle it on your paper. Self-care is not a luxury. Self-care is your professional responsibility. If you work in a field where you take care of other people and the decisions that you make have stakes in the lives of other people, self-care is your professional responsibility. And it is just as important. I wish that we could, as a profession, elevate self-care and self-inventory and all these things that I'm talking about to the same level of importance as licensing and continuing education. You know, I'm not knocking continuing education. I think that's important. I just think that self-care is as important as continuing education. I think that I could do a lot of damage to my clients if I'm not managing these things, if I'm letting, you know, my own personal frustrations, if I'm letting my lack of space over and over and over, if I'm powering through and missing things, if I'm fatiguing myself over and over and over, I can actually cause a lot of harm to the clients that I serve, and probably more harm than I could cause if, you know, I don't remember the name of a theory. So I'm not saying that one is more important than the other. I think that self-care and that care of self should be elevated to the same level of importance. And I know I'm talking to people who are out probably doing direct services or maybe at various levels here. And so I know that what I'm saying, it's a lot bigger than what I'm saying. You know, earlier on, we talked about kind of societal expectations and how that makes it hard to manage this. So while we work at that high level and maybe try to change the game at 20,000 feet above, I encourage all of you to think about what's that one thing you could do? What's that one little extra piece or new perspective that you could do? Because it is a part of your professional responsibility, in my humble opinion. So I invite you to protect the time and energy that you need to reinvest in yourself. It pays off in the long run and in the short run for you, for your work, for the people that you love, and for everything in between. So we have just a few minutes left, and I'm happy to field questions. I think the other facilitators on the line will help me make sure I'm seeing your questions, but I do just want to extend my gratitude to each of you. It was certainly my pleasure and an honor to spend the day, spend the morning with you. And I hope that we can continue to connect. I certainly wish everyone, a safe and happy end of summer and fall. And I really thank you all for participating and being there in the chat. It's really, really helpful. And like I said, welcome to check out my website. I have some helpful tips on there. Connect with me on socials. I share a lot of stuff on my social channels about everything we've talked about today. But thank you all so much, and I will turn it back over to Gwen and the team. But certainly if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions? Please put them in the chat, but I also want to say on behalf of everybody, Jenny, it has been phenomenal, a very quick 2 hours, and I know that we could have listened to you all day, and it was great. It was just really good, and what we need to hear about self-care and how we take care of ourselves. And I think your practical day-to-day examples that we all deal with, everybody could identify with what you had to say. So thank you. So I'm going to give it another, there's so many kudos in the chat box, and I know several people have indicated they couldn't see all the chat, and that was on purpose. So it wasn't anything that you did, it was something we did. And but everybody is just singing your praises, Jenny, and we appreciate it. Well, I don't see any questions, and I just wanted to remind people that you will receive a certificate. We have participation certificates for anybody that would like one. We have NASW Tennessee CEUs for our members who also want one of those. You will also be asked to complete an evaluation. It will be very short and sweet, but we do need that. And we also are going to ask you to, suggest other speakers maybe you've heard at a conference, maybe a topic that that you've heard or think that we haven't covered. We would love to know that, because we want to make sure that we provide our audience with every topic or speakers that you need. Jenny has so graciously agreed to share her slides, and she said most of those were more like prompts for her rather than a lot of content, but maybe it'll take you back. And also this training will be recorded. It will sometimes takes, and it will also be on TCCY's YouTube channel. But it takes us a little bit to, of course, to get that uploaded. It takes certificates about 2 weeks for us to get those out. So please be patient. We will get those out. But if for some reason after 2 weeks you have not gotten your certificate, please reach out to one of us. As always, we just want to thank everybody for giving of their time this morning. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. We had the opportunity to hear Jenny at a national conference, and that is how we got to know her and bring her to Tennessee. So I'm sure that she, as she's indicated, will be open to you reaching out to her personally through her Facebook page or through the website. And so thank you again. We hope it's Friday. We hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And maybe we'll practice some of the things that we've heard today. And we thank everybody for being here. Thank you very much.